Waiting to see. I don't see any attendance in the chat.
There we go.
Thanks, Steve.
A lot of schools we're excited to have back with us. So with that, let me and Mark.
You guys are excited to go. This is the earliest we've ever started, and all you guys are here. It's great. Queens is in the house, it looks like.
I heard a frightening rumor that Queens is probably going to be pushing the limits of our team size. Potentially 25 students interested. So, oh, good, another Moon Division. Lovely. All right. So with that, welcome to our proposal webinar. This is our first time hosting this, as we've adjusted our timelines for any teams that are returning. You know that this is a wild deviation for us. Our hope is to make this cycle a little bit more friendly to the students, to allow you guys to have more time between checkpoints or the milestones, and to have enough time to properly integrate any feedback that you're given along the way to make sure that come April, when we're launching these rockets, you guys have nothing that is surprising you, and we have just a wonderful day full of perfect launches. So with that, I will start with some introductions. We have myself. I am Rob Cannon. I am the FNL program manager. We have Mark Abatasaway from Blue Origin and Brittany Nez from GE Aerospace. Both of them are our technical leads over each of the Moon and Mars divisions. And with that, just a brief introduction. There's a bunch of people that are involved with this competition to help make sure that it's a success. It isn't just, 4 people, but it is still a small team. We will go with more introductions as we get to the kickoff, but sort of a standard for all of our slide decks. And with that, I think I'm going to let Mark run the slides for the most part.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Rob. So today's overview, our webinar is about the proposal milestone, which is coming up here very soon. I think in about 2 to 3 weeks, you guys will be submitting your proposals, which again, as stated, is the earliest we've ever had proposals submitted. So of course, that doesn't leave much time. You guys are just starting school. Many of you are returning. I see a lot of the schools here have kind of been in it before, so nothing really new. But we'll kind of cover some tips here for proposal. And those of you that are new will kind of get a heads up on what we expect in the proposal milestone. Next, Rob.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So just to help, if you guys want to follow along with us, all of our files can be found on the website spacegrant.carthage.edu/First Nations launch. I think you can also use the short link of /FNL. We'll get you there. The most important thing that you guys are looking for, handbooks are live as of just a half hour ago. So the Moon Handbook and Mars Handbooks are both available. I'll just drag this over real quick. So here for Moon and Mars, we also have them available secondary. Just to point it out before we get a little further, actually it was under this. We will also be using the report templates and scoring page. We have a USLI proposal example that we'll be referencing along the way. So with that.
All right, thanks, Rob. Yeah, we'll be referencing those documents throughout this webinar as well. So hopefully you guys know where to find all those. And of course, we'll share those links with you at the end of this webinar. So what is a proposal milestone? I just want to be clear on what the proposal is. It's the initial milestone. It's the first of 5 milestones that you guys complete. The other 4 are listed there. PDR is your preliminary design, CDR is critical design, FR is flight ready, and PLAR is your post-launch assessment. And then the proposal phase, of course, is when your team is still forming. So many of you, I know a lot of the veteran teams maybe have your team all ready to go. Some of you may still be in work recruiting people or kind of, brainstorming ideas, things like that. And then when you submit the proposal to us in a couple weeks, the point of that is to provide information that shows that your team is prepared and will be successful. And this comes in multiple phases, and we'll talk a bit more about this later in the webinar. What it is not, your proposal is not, you should not be submitting technical details, such as component selections in your proposal. Those kind of come later in preliminary design and critical design. Those are kind of the down selects when you get to those components. And this kind of goes to a lot of the veteran teams who you kind of know what you're doing. Maybe at the end of last year, you kind of figured out all this stuff for recovery and avionics. Doesn't mean you just start and present that to us at the proposal phase. We want you to kind of blank slate everything, clear the slate, kind of start over and start looking at new recovery, new components, and start doing that research and submit those in your proposal. So we wanted to see some concepts and trait studies as well in your proposal. So especially for the challenge changes every year. So you're going to talk about, well, maybe we're going to approach the challenge this way, or maybe we're going to look at it this way and do different things. So present those to us in your proposal, those trait studies, even like your simulations and your rocket choice and your motor choice. Make sure to examine a bunch of different, as many different kits or configurations or motor choices as possible, and present those to us to show us that you've done those trait studies in your proposal report. And Brittany, if you got anything to add, feel free to jump in. Proposal submissions. So coming up here in, I think, 2 weeks, you will submit a proposal report. Please follow and fill the 2025 proposal template. So that's another note to our veteran returning teams. The template changes every year. So don't just grab last year's, 2024's proposal and say, hey, we're just going to grab this document and then make whatever changes. The order may have changed of certain sections. We may have eliminated a section that we no longer ask you to report out. So make sure to go to the website, download the newest template, and then, you can copy things over. But again, try and start from a clean slate. Your judges, such as myself and Brittany, we've seen your proposal from last year. So if we find it's just a straight copy and paste from last year to this year, points may be deducted for that. So we want to see the new team and the new folks doing new work on each of the proposal reports. Another thing you submit a proposal is a ROCSIM, basic ROCSIM file. So we're not asking for the whole thing, the finished product. We're not asking for all the internal details down to the finished product. We want to see that you know how to work ROCSIM, that you've acquired it, you have a trial license or whatnot until you get your grant. And then, you know how to load the model, insert a motor, run the model, and then get outputs from that. And then finally, the third item you submit is a fly sheet. Basic flight simulation performance is provided on the fly sheet, and it all basically comes from your simulation. So if you haven't done simulations, you're not going to fill out the fly sheet properly. There's no way you're going to know your time to apogee if you haven't run a simulation, for example. And these are the things asked for in the fly sheet. I think we'll look at an example of a fly sheet later on in this webinar. All right, so some more details on the report, right? We asked for general information. So kind of this is just your team. You can write some bios. You're going to have a team structure, right? Maybe you have a team lead. You're going to have a structures lead, an avionics lead, and whatnot. And that's all up to you guys to figure out your team breakdown. Some of the more larger teams that have numerous people, you may kind of double up. Maybe you have co-structures people or co-analysis or co-test or or things like that. You also need to list a faculty advisor. So I believe if you've submitted a NOI, you already have an advisor listed. You also need a rocketry mentor. And again, the veteran teams, you all kind of have rocketry mentors in the Mars division. New teams and Moon teams may or may not have rocketry mentors, and that's okay. We'll help you find them as we go. Facilities and equipment. Again, we want you to list all of the school facilities and equipment, and this requires foresight to understand what you all need to design, test, and build a high-powered rocket. Safety, we want you to provide and think about all the safety aspects of designing, building, and flying a high-powered rocket. Then keep in mind there's various safety aspects, such as your school may have policies about what chemical components you can keep on campus, because there's some energetics and black powder and motors that may or may not be allowed on campus, or stored safely, for example. So make sure you kind of understand that, work with your faculty advisor and your rocketry mentor to figure out those safety aspects. And then rocketry, of course, has state and federal laws that we follow, rules that we follow as well for safe operation. Kind of the main point of the proposal as well is the technical section. So this is kind of where, again, like I stated, you're not really presenting what you've done so far. You're more presenting, this is what we want to do, or this is what we're going to do in the coming weeks, right? And, you write the proposal up to that phase, and then after proposal, that's when you start executing all of these tasks to complete going into the next milestone, which is your preliminary design. So your vehicle, you're going to talk about, some vehicle, just your dimensions. It's a 4-inch rocket. It's, however long it is, however the weight of it is, what kind of material you guys are thinking of for your rockets. Depending if you're on Mars or Moon, maybe you have a kit, maybe it's a COTS, fiberglass, or maybe you're fabricating your own airframes for the Mars Challenge, for example. So just kind of flushing that out in your proposal technical section. Let us know what you guys are attempting to do or plan to do in the coming weeks. Same thing with recovery. So kind of thinking about, well, what kind of parachutes do we need? What kind of recovery components do we need? Shock cords, parachute protection, what kind of sizes and strength do these recovery components need? And it's all going to change. It's not going to be anything final, because as your design matures, components will change, loads will change. But kind of just flushing it out, letting us know that you know how to look up a recovery system and the components that go into a recovery system. Motor, of course, you have motor choices that are in the handbook. They'll be in the appendix, depending if you're on Moon or Mars, which motors you guys can choose. And then nice segue to the next section, simulations. So using the vehicle and the recovery and the motor, you're going to build your RockSim simulation. And we want you to kind of examine a few different airframes and a few different motors. So let us know kind of your leading choice going into proposal, right? At proposal stage, we have this kit. It weighs, 10 pounds, and we're going to fly on a K motor, for example. And we know that's going to change. Every milestone, you kind of given a chance to present a new motor and a new kit combination. And then it kind of dials into critical design is kind of where you're making those final selections into flight readiness. And then finally, your challenge, provide initial concepts to address the challenge. And the challenge is outlined in the handbook. So for Moon and Mars, it's very similar. Mars has more components, more sensors that you need to make and consider, and Moon has a few less. But think about what approaches and what components you may want to start integrating into your design. Let me adjust my screen here. All right, report overview. And then finally for report overview, just talking about the project management side, and kind of this is after the technical section. You're going to talk about your test plans, and this is kind of Mars specifically. These are optional for the Moon teams. So if you're feeling up for a Moon team, or you're a returning Moon team, you're kind of looking for a more challenge, or you got enough people on your team and you can do these extra tasks. The Mars guys will provide a test plan. What do you need to test? What do you want to test? So thinking, right at the beginning of the project in the proposal, What are all the things we want to test? We want to test the structure, or if we're building an airframe, we want to test the strength of the airframe, for example, right? Maybe we want to test make a hoop test or a compression test. Maybe we want to do a shear test or something such as fasteners or something on the wall of the vehicle airframe. Of course, you want to test all your electronics. So this is your avionics, your COTS altimeters, and your COTS GPS. And those are the test plans that we want you guys to come up with. And then, of course, all of your challenge electronics as well may need to be tested. So there's various ways to test things. You can test them on the bench in a chamber, or just I know last year we did drones, right? So a lot of your Mars teams may have a drone that you can use for your test now. So you're going to put your electronics, your GPS on your drone and take your drone for a spin, and make sure that GPS functions in a moving fashion, or your altimeters, for example, right? You can use your drones now to test certain components. So ensure you test rocket components and challenge components, like I just mentioned. And then your test plan will be updated at each milestone. So kind of take this seriously. You're not going to have any results, but you're kind of just creating the test plan. It's kind of like, what are the things we want to test or we need to test? Let's list those out at proposal. And then at preliminary design, maybe you've completed a few tests. So you'll kind of update the status of that test. And then, maybe there's results that come out of that. Maybe the test failed and you need to go to a bigger component or something stronger for the next iteration of that test. Just some suggestions as well. I suggest you create a separate spreadsheet to track your testing. So even though we ask for it in the report, and you're going to create a table such as the table shown on the screen there, the best way to do it is just create an Excel spreadsheet and track your tests that way. When it comes time to submit the report, you could do a screenshot and just kind of copy and paste over your Excel spreadsheet data into the report itself. I believe we're also accepting links. If you want to just create the Excel spreadsheet, store it in a document or a shared drive somewhere, and just make that link public. You can also just put the link in the report itself and say our test document or our test plan can be found here. And then the judges, the review team, such as myself, will click on those links and it will go inspect your test document. Similarly for requirements verification, you're going to provide an initial requirements verification list. So again, kind of go through the handbook. There's multiple pages of requirements. There's challenge requirements, general requirements, the vehicle, avionics, recovery, and safety requirements. So compile those into a list. It's probably the best bet. And again, Excel spreadsheets probably the best bet. And you can assign those to people. You can say, the recovery requirements belong to our recovery lead. The general vehicle requirements belong to our team lead. And that's the person responsible to ensure that those requirements are met or satisfied or not violated, depending on the requirement. And then we've always observed, or we'll say, that ignoring or missing requirements are usually detrimental to success. I recall in the past, there'll be teams who just kind of miss that, the rocket needs to reach a certain altitude, or it cannot exceed a certain speed, or it needs to, meet a 5-to-1 thrust to weight ratio. Those are all, important requirements. And if you go too far into the design without meeting that requirement, it usually results in a major design change, which is kind of detrimental to other requirements. So it's kind of requirements. You're balancing a lot of things in the requirements. So make sure you track those in a requirements verification table, and then you can copy the table into the report, or you can just, again, create a link and put that in the report and make sure that's public, so anyone with our reports can view those requirements verifications.
I would just throw in, interject here. If you're going to embed the table into your document, please be mindful of how small some of the information may be. Don't try to cram the entire, like, if you're going to have like test plan over the entire cycle, just be mindful that it's going to be tiny for some of it if you're going to have 6 months worth of stuff spread out across it. So at times you may want to just snapshot smaller chunks of that to call it out, sort of like how you have here for the recovery verification matrix from our example.
And I'm sure you guys know how to format things properly, right? Like if you have an Excel page, right, and you guys know how to make a page format on Excel, it should match the page on the Word document as well. So don't try and shrink all the entire table that you create and put it on one page in the Word document, right? Make sure it's page for page, it's legible so we can read it if you are copying or embedding pages into the document. Next.
Well, real quick, for the Moon Challenge teams, the resources are still there. I kept all of the appendices for writing up test plans and requirements. So even though Moon Challenge teams don't have to do the test plans or requirements, it is going to be very helpful for your team along the way to be able to have these. So if you're not submitting them in your report, I'd strongly recommend at least doing them on your own time to be able to keep track of where you are with your timeline and making sure you test all of your components before launch day. So all of the resources are still there. They're in the appendix. You can still access them. Yeah, I'd recommend to at least do that on your own time if you can.
And then finally, wrapping up the proposal report, part of the project plan section, scheduling, budgeting, and sustainability. So similarly with scheduling, you're going to provide an initial schedule outline. We prefer the Gantt chart format as seen on the screen. And then include such aspects as testing, procurement, building, fabrication. Try and think about, at the proposal phase, you're trying to think about where throughout the entire, from proposal all the way to launch weekend, where do we need to test? When should we have the deadline or the last kind of test? And they're usually not specific single dates. It's kind of a window, as you can see in the Gantt chart there as well, right? Maybe, testing takes place over a 2-week period or 3-week period. Even procurements, for example, right? They may begin in 1 month and end, 6 weeks later or something like that. So kind of just map those out in your Gantt chart. Show us that you know how to create a schedule and stick to that schedule. And again, this is for your benefit. One of the detriments we see again with multiple teams year after year is teams procrastinate or teams don't plan. And then, next thing you know, it's 4 weeks from launch weekend and teams are still struggling at procurement or teams haven't tested anything. It's because they didn't follow this plan at the start proposal. They didn't create these schedules to kind of guide them along the way. So if you want to be successful, make sure to create a schedule and follow it and update it each of the milestones. So again, we'll ask you to submit this at every milestone. So again, it doesn't need to be super detailed, that proposal, but kind of start thinking about, what are the windows or where do we need to kind of bake things into our schedule. And then, preliminary design, next milestone, you'll kind of refine that a little bit more as you work and complete tasks between milestones. You'll start to think about, well, maybe we need to add some things or move some things to the left or right in the schedule in order to be launch ready on launch weekend. Again, we suggest you create and maintain a separate spreadsheet. Again, you can just copy that into the report, or you can create a link and put it in the report and make sure it's readable if you copy it in. Similarly for budget, you're going to provide an initial budget outline, include all funding sources and break down your budget by budget allocations by group. So you may say, hey, we have $4,000 or $6,000. We're going to spend maybe half of it. Maybe we'll spend $2,000 on the rocket itself, and maybe we'll spend $1,000 on the payload, right? 25% on payload, and then we'll spend the last 25% on travel. So try and think of these and kind of just draft up these decisions at the start in proposal. And again, you'll get a chance to refine those as you go. So again, it's to your detriment if you don't include these budget breakdowns and you don't think about these things. Again, teams will struggle, and we've seen teams struggle where they get somewhere and they kind of run out of money and they forgot to allocate something, or they allocated way too much for travel and they're kind of skimping on the challenge budget, for example, right? So think about these things at the start. Think about how much everything costs. Go and research your components, right? And if you find maybe you do need more money for travel because you have a large team, you're going to want to increase your funding sources as well. So maybe that's when you you go around your community and talk to the school and see how much they can donate or how much industry, companies can donate to help, and having that budget breakdown kind of helps with that, asking for support as well. You can show them, hey, this is our breakdown. Here's what we're spending. Here's what we're short on. Can you help support this or sponsor this travel or sponsor these purchases? And then sustainability, of course, just talking about the team. Many of you teams have been here for a while, have no problem with sustainability. But for the newer teams, think about how do we keep the team growing? How do we keep the team alive year to year? What kind of resources do we need? Visibility within the community. Next, do you have the report open, Rob? What's our time? 2:29. Yeah, we're good for time. If we can skip through and look at some sections of that report. So like Rob mentioned, there's some example templates or example proposals on the website. There we go. Go back up to that one there, Rob. So that previous chart, this is kind of a team breakdown. So this team's, like we talked about, general information. They're kind of listing their, team lead. It's, response to the structures lead and how they're assigning their roles. So it's good to have one of those in your report as well, kind of showing the flow of who's responsible for what, and how the team all responds, the team architecture. Facilities and equipment. So you can see it's all listed in bullet point, which is nice and clean. And they got an image of their lab, which kind of hopefully highlights many of the tools that we see in the bullet point list. So that's nice. Other images of other workspaces and labs. I see there's some 3D printers there. There's a wood shop that they can work in, and just listing all your kind of necessary tools and equipment, right? So if you're going to fabricate something, then I hope you list and show that you have the capability and facilities to fabricate something. If you want to 3D print stuff, show us that you have multiple 3D printers and the capability of those printers to make that happen. Yeah, go past the safety. Go past the risk assessment. We don't really require a risk assessment, but you can if you want. Safety verification. Technical section. So here we see, they start their technical section showing unfortunately, this is Open Rocket, not RockSim, but a simulation image basically. And kind of right at the very top, you're going to show, well, this is what our simulation model looks like. And then beneath it, start talking about, well, here's the length of it. Here's the weight of it, right? So don't just start putting text. There's also a lot of text on this page as well. So maybe the text could be more easily read if it's in a table format, for example, right? Or like we saw previously, it could be in a bullet point format, right? Kind of listing length, weight, diameter, fin span, some of the really important aspects of that simulation model, and just referencing the image. Or even just using text, like writing on the image itself, right? You guys can put a little box and say, T equals, whatever your wall thickness is or your fin thickness. And then we see outputs here of the simulation as well. So this kind of just shows me that this team knows how to run RockSim. They know what the rocket stability is. And then just putting some results. Some more tabular stuff. Images, right? So CAD images, again, for you Mars guys, you guys can CAD up your parts. Doesn't need to be at proposal. If you've got some CAD models at proposal, then great. But maybe more towards preliminary design, critical design, when you're starting to integrate or fabricate parts, show us those CAD models in your report. Especially with mechanisms, right? Or something especially like for the challenge, you're going to have to fabricate maybe a housing that holds your electronics, right? So, make sure to kind of really highlight those CAD models. This is flight profile. We give you this. It's in our handbook. No need to make one. If you want to make a different flight profile, it's the same profile as the one in the handbook. What else do we have? Some formulas. Recovery verification matrix. So we could look at this for a second. So this was on the slide as well for the verification. So right, the requirement is in the first column. So you'll find all the requirements. I believe there's something like 60 requirements in the handbook. For each requirement, you're going to have a verification method. How do we prove or make sure this requirement's satisfied? And then the status of that verification. So at proposal, I would think that all your statuses would be open. They're all, haven't been verified, haven't been completed yet. And then as you go, hopefully by launch weekend, the status of all your requirements is closed or verified or satisfied or whatever it is. And you can see it runs multiple pages. So again, if you have a table that runs multiple pages, it's best to put it as an appendix. It's very hard to read, and you can just put a link in your inline text, say, hey, see appendix A1 or whatever it is you want to number your appendix for a complete list of, or if you're going to put a link, just put the link there and we'll follow that link. Motor specs, more tables, more requirements. What else do we want to cover here? Oh, some CAD images. So showing integration. So CAD's also great for integration as well, right? So if you have two systems kind of coming together, or you have parts that nest like cylinders or things like that, or you need to know a length or distance of two apart, CAD's great for that as well. So more integration images, more assemblies. There's some mechanisms. I think we wanted to get down to the project management stuff there, the Gantt chart and there we go. So you see here's a Gantt chart. Can we zoom a bit, Rob?
Whoa.
That works. So you can see October, I think it's September, October, and this was back from 2018. This is kind of an older report, but same thing. You see their proposal phase. They list a duration, start date, and finish date, right? So it's the same thing with everything you guys do. When you write a report, right, you're going to start your report writing on one date, you're going to end it on another date. So how long is the duration of that date? And then it kind of maps it all out, physically, so you can kind of see how things are overlapping or which things depend on each other on the right side of that screen. And then preliminary design, if we scroll next page, and then you'll see it's broken up by pages, right? It's a nice kind of size chart on the page. They're not squashing it this way or making it really flat and long. So figure out how to break up your Gantt charts so we can read them properly. Budget, there's a budget breakdown there. And then same thing with the budgets in your spreadsheet, right? Don't just put part cost, right? You want to put a little bit more detail into your part. Is it part of an assembly? Maybe grouping the assemblies together. You can track that using your budget spreadsheet. You're going to have a unit cost, and then you're going to have quantity because maybe you're buying more of one thing, right? And then the total cost. And maybe you want to have shipping costs. I know some of you teams, are located rather far away from your suppliers. Maybe there's a little bit extra overnight shipping costs or things like that, that you need to account for in your budget. Also providing the vendor name to us as well. So when we review your budgets, we want to say, hey, maybe I think you can go with a different vendor for this, or maybe we question the vendor that you're getting things from. And then the status as well. So keeping track of the status in your budget, is it purchased? Is it on order? Is it shipped? Is it, pending? Whatever that is. Make sure to include all that in your budget spreadsheets.
And
again, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to interject here. Having a budget that's a little more detailed, doesn't have to be as in-depth as this, but including some of that extra information of like the vendor source, what the description is, those extra pieces of information will make it easier for you when you're trying to do the reimbursements at the end of throughout the competition. So that'll help you be prepared for when you have to do those forms as well.
So then again, at proposal milestone, like now, You're not going to have any of this detail, right? Because hopefully you haven't made these component selections yet, but just be prepared to present that, right? So you could present a blank table and say, hey, once we get around to figuring out these components, we'll fill in this table. At proposal, you're basically just going to have the budget breakdowns. You're going to have 20% of our budget's going to travel, 40% is going to rocket, 30% is going to challenge. So just kind of doing those breakdowns. RockSim, don't forget to account for that, because you're going to have to purchase RockSim licenses. So that should be in your budget as well. Any PPE, safety things will also be in your budget, right? Do you guys need to purchase gloves or masks or goggles or whatever it is you guys need to do to fabricate this rocket, right? Maybe the school already has them on hand. Maybe your team has them from last year. It's good to put them all in there, list them out, and then just, keep track of those. Kind of a, not just a budget, but more of a inventory tracking, I would say, beyond budgeting. And then I think this team was very well funded. Look, they had Boeing and AIAA funding and all kinds of funding. Even Garmin was funding them. So, and that's all we got for that. We'll go back to the PowerPoint. So some proposal report tips: use figures and images in place of text. So we just saw in that example, right? There's a lot of images I pointed out that were very helpful. For me, when I'm reviewing, I like to see the simulation model, and then I like to see references to that simulation model. And maybe in the future, not now, but if you buy a component or you're looking at possibly buying a component, put a picture of that component in your report. Even the facilities equipment, right? Putting pictures of your lab space or pictures of the major components you're going to use at your school are good. Units, another tip is determine a consistent set of units at the beginning of your project, like now. Ensure everyone's using the same units. For example, and again, we've seen this in the past where the recovery section talks about centimeters, and then the simulations, the RockSim model has inches, right? And it's kind of mixed up the units and things like that. So try and pick a consistent set of units and make sure everyone on the team uses those units for describing the same thing. And then use tables where applicable, right? Like we talked about budgets and schedule, as you saw. If the tables are large or more than 1 page or 2 pages, try and put them as an appendix instead of inline. All right, the RockSim overview. So simulations. So please obtain and use RockSim software. A lot of you veteran teams already know this. There's trial versions available, 30-day trial versions, which if you get one today, it'll last you past the proposal phase. And then, not everyone on the team needs to get one at the same time. So maybe at the start, you can stagger your trial versions and learn how to run RockSim before you get your licensed versions after you receive your grant. RockSim is the required program. So a lot of times we get questions: can we use OpenRocket? Can we use RAS Aero? Can we use some other software program? You can use those to supplement, but in your report and all your submissions, we want to see the RockSim file, the .rkt. It makes it easier for us on the back end to compare when we're all comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. Hopefully that makes sense. At a minimum, you'll need to have the airframe selected. So at proposal, we just kind of want to see the airframe. The nose cone shape, the fin shape, the tube diameter, tube thickness, kind of some weights. You don't need to worry too much about bulkheads or, eye bolts or all the internal structure at proposal phase. Those will come and you'll get them at PDR and CDR. You'll get feedback kind of telling you to add these components and think about these components at each of the milestones. And yeah, basically we just want to see that you have and you understand how to use RockSim. You'll get feedback with comments about your simulations. So please expect, review, and incorporate this feedback. And then proposal fly sheet overview as well. So finally, the third component that you submit is your fly sheet. And that's basically your vehicle parameters. So fill out the fly sheet with the required information and ensure you use the correct fly sheet. So again, the fly sheet changes year to year. So don't just grab 2024's proposal fly sheet and think you can just change the values. because we make minor changes from year to year based on feedback. So there's going to be slight changes. So make sure you grab the right one. Otherwise, you're going to lose points because maybe you're missing something or submitting something that's no longer required. And then you'll get points deducted for that. So each milestone, the amount of required fly sheet data will increase. So you'll notice that proposal phase, you're only filling out maybe half the fly sheet, even though you veteran guys kind of know the whole thing and you understand the entire fly sheet. This is kind of just applicable for maybe the newer teams or across the board, right? We're looking at Moon, Mars, and some gateway teams at some point. So we don't want to overwhelm everyone at the start. So it kind of builds, at each milestone. By CDR, that's kind of when we're filling out the entire milestone. I mean, there's no, if you want to fill out the rest of it, you're not going to get bonus points for filling out the whole thing at proposal. But it kind of builds, with a basic and then kind of leads into the rest of the parameters. And then again, the point of the fly sheet, we want to see that you understand those parameters. We want to see that you know how to get them out of RockSim, or you know how to do a hand calculation to determine the thrust to weight ratio, or how to figure a rail exit velocity. And then there's also requirements for those as well, right? So that kind of relates back to your requirements verification, right? You have to have 5-to-1 thrust to weight ratio. So how do you verify that? There's a hand calc. You have to have a minimum of 52 feet per second rail exit velocity. How do you verify that? Simulation. So you're going to put the results of the simulation and put the exact number that comes out of the simulation for your rail exit velocity into your fly sheet. And then we'll know that you both know how to fill out a fly sheet, know what rail exit velocity is, know how to run a simulation, and you'll have a successful flight. So you'll also get feedback with comments on your fly sheet. So please expect, review, and incorporate any feedback for the next milestone. Next. And then I guess there's some RockSim resources and that's all in the handbook as well. So there's an appendix with all of these links, I believe. There's multiple appendices, to be honest. There's an appendix, like a 4-pager just on RockSim alone that kind of explains how to get the trial, how to get the full version. There's an appendix that tells you about the tutorials for RockSim. And then there's at the very end of the handbook, the last 2 pages are like a resource page. There's a bunch of links, like just 2 pages of links that take you to everything from procurements to vendors to suppliers to, I don't know, the federal laws of rocketry. So there's a lot of resources around. So make sure you poke around. The handbook is the golden. The handbook's your God. You need to look. Everything's in the handbook. Everything you need. Before you come and ask us, look in the handbook. It's probably in the handbook.
I think I was going to interject with a small.
Can we look at a fly sheet too, Rob? I don't know if you had one open after this.
We can go to that one first. So this was from last year. So there's a small update that'll be coming to it, but just so you can see how certain fields are.
There we go. Yeah, like we mentioned, so the ones that are blank, you don't need to fill out. It's only the ones that have, something in it like parachute diameter, manufacturer. There's not many fields required at proposal. So we only want you to know, whatever that is, 30% of the fly sheet information at proposal. Even though you'll probably know more. I know many of you guys, returning guys, understand all of it. We only require a little bit at a time.
Yep. So RockSim, it's through Apogee. We do have links to it. When you're on their website, they do have down here 30-day free trial. And then as soon as the competition, like award letters go out and you finally have your award number, so it'll be like FNL25 _ 10-1. That's where you can come down here to where it has the school site and a rocketry challenge offer. And then for $15, you're able to get a license for the year. So this is where that number from the competition, your award number will go right here to get those licenses.
And we'll remind at the time of award or even at the proposal reviews, we'll remind your team lead and advisor. Those are the two people who have access to that information to make sure that that's implemented properly.
And then because we reference it all the time, all the resources that you guys have available. So the FNL website, tools and tips. Each of these sections will expand for the webinars. So even though we have just a few under our belt so far for this year, we do have last year's. So if you want extra resources and information, we have done RockSim tutorials every year. So we encourage you to go back, look through. But then also over here, a little further down, there's Rocket instructional videos / webinars. This is a full set of 6 videos that will take you through different aspects. And we do have one dedicated to RockSim as well. So just want to make sure you guys know that there are multiple resources available to the teams. I think that was our last slide. Questions?
Any questions? Don't all go at once. If you're shy, you can drop it in the chat.
No, feel free. You don't have, you can come off of
Great.
mute.
Grace.
Okay. Hi, guys. I have a quick question just about the fly sheet. Rob, you mentioned that there's going to be an updated fly sheet that we should work off of. Is the one that's currently on the website in the templates, is that the previous one or the updated one?
The easiest way to tell is look at the file name.
Okay,
Our file names, we always start off with FNL and then the competition year. So the ones that
Got
are on the website are all saying 24. All the new ones will be 25 for the cycle.
okay, perfect.
Major
Thank you.
update for the fly sheet, the difference between last year and this. We're not doing deployable payloads, so that payload section in the bottom right, I think, is coming off.
Got it. That makes sense. And then the next question was just for the notice of intent due date that's coming up. All we need to do to indicate that is just sign up our team using the website, correct? Or is there another action item we need to do?
Do you mean the 24th due date?
Yes.
So that's what all of this is working towards. The proposal's been shifted up. So the NOI will need to be in, and then we'll also have the extra deliverables. The grants site that you normally upload all your information to, I believe it only has a spot for the report right now.
Yeah.
Anything else you'll end up sending to fnl@carthage.edu.
Got it.
But we are working to get the additional fields added back in.
But the NOI sorry, we're in the same room. The NOI refers to your advisor submitting notice of intent to compete, not just your team members,
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
which you already have, by the way.
Okay, good to know. Thanks, Connie.
No other questions? I'm glad I covered the material so perfectly. I'm expecting 100% on all your reports. So thanks, Steve.
Yeah, I do have one question if you'll have me. So is there anything that you recommend, any newcomers that you've seen, like anything that's happened consistently with year after year with a new flyers, if that makes sense?
In what regard, like reports, or you mean like at launch weekend?
Yeah, in reports, I'm sorry.
I think
Um,
anything, the biggest thing it comes down to not
Time management.
relating like a milestone to what you're reporting on. Like it's obvious that people will not have read the handbook. That's really why we're stressing it heavy this cycle is your answers are generally in there. So if you're covering something, or we've seen teams that'll sort of go off on tangents, developing and designing the rocket, and have completely missed the mark on some stuff.
Yeah, I would second that. There's a lot in there that's important, like and related to Rob's comment, requirements. There's teams who just completely miss that there's requirements in the handbook. So they're, we'll be at PDR or almost CDR, like halfway through the project, and they don't even understand that the rocket has to satisfy certain speeds and altitudes, and there's all kinds of safety requirements. So that one's important for new teams. Um, and for me, just related to that as well, simulations to me are very important. Again, there's in the past there's teams who didn't realize that they had to do simulations, and somehow they were just guessing, what things were, or guessing, and they made it halfway through the project. So understanding and downloading that rock sim and learning how to operate that early in the program will set you up for better success.
And I'd have to say, if you're new, which you are, coming to the in-person launch to learn, which you are. So good job, Kenneth.
Thank you.
And thank you, Stephen, for the suggestion in the chat of time management. So using the Gantt chart, using a schedule, sort of back, start with launch weekend. We know when that is, of April 25th, 26th, 27th. Work your way backwards to know where you need to be come November 1, December 1, January 1. And you can help build up that schedule to make sure you guys don't get pinched further down the line. Sometimes you'll want to know that, like, you'll want extra lead time for purchases. Last year, it turned into a little bit of a nightmare for some teams trying to do purchases last minute because supply chains were a little crimped, especially with the drones. But
on the same token, don't purchase too early. That's also a detriment. So you need to understand your entire design and project before you begin to purchase. What we've seen too is a team will just arbitrarily go purchase a 6-inch airframe. And then 2 months later, they decide, or it comes out that it's too heavy or it's too big, and they're not going to successfully reach the altitude or the objectives. So there's kind of a sweet point. Usually we recommend procurements don't start till around PDR time frame, and they end around CDR. They're kind of ramping up around CDR. And you can find that again if you review some of the example reports that are on the website. You can look at their budgets and their schedules as well, and you get a better idea of when they're doing their. And we kind of picked some of the better, the good reports to put on the examples on the website.
I guess that brings up another question. Is there anything on the reports that you guys just despise seeing, I guess, if that makes sense? Or if there's just like anything that just you don't want to see or you don't need to see, or if it's just a waste of time to even have it on there? Or is this kind of like more of a case of you can't have too much information?
I would say we talked about this team. So we provide you a template. And I don't know if Rob can bring up the template. We provide you a template that gives you bullet points, and your team is to address those bullet points. But after you write the section that addresses the bullet point, please delete the bullet point. So some teams, for example, will leave all of the bullet points in, and those are just the guidance, like the tips for that section, right? So it's a little annoying, not super, it's not going to kill you, but so there's an example there, the template is showing.
And
Yeah,
while
and you basically replace all of that text with the text you're writing. It's kind of just a guidance section.
I think the easier way to look at this, use this as a formatting tool, not as the content. The content should be coming from the handbook for those challenge parameters, considering that both Moon and Mars have different sets of criteria that they're working towards. But use this as your format to try to fill it in for how we have it broken down in the sections.
I don't think there's anything that I wouldn't say like you can't have too much. I would almost say it's quality over quantity. Don't just throw a bunch of stuff in there, right? Like it's an eyesore for me as a reviewer. I don't want to have to review 60 or 80 pages when you can tell me the same story in 30 pages. You know what I mean?
Oh yes, that totally makes sense. Yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah, we're not grading on word count.
Is there a page limit? I'm trying to remember.
We say 40 page, like the first 40 pages are counted, not counting appendices, but I would encourage
Yeah.
teams to try to be succinct if possible. Like you
Yeah,
don't
the
need to be
handbook.
running against the 40 pages.
Yeah, the handbook again is your Bible. So the handbook tells you at each milestone what the page limit is for that milestone. And pictures take up far less than text, right? So it's like throw a picture in there and be done with it.
Makes it fun when we're reading through 24 of these.
I've got another quick question. I know last year we dealt a decent bit with motor delays and that sort of thing. Do we know if that's still a problem for this year, or is that more resolved? Like if we're planning on getting a motor, should we get on that sooner rather than later?
I think you're referring to like just procurement on our end. It
Yeah,
is a bit addressed because we moved the entire schedule to the left.
got it.
So we moved the time for motor selections back like 2 or 3 weeks.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
But that doesn't mean you have an extra 3 weeks to go.
Any others? Well, if there are no other questions, I want to thank you all for your time. This slide or this presentation and slide deck will be uploaded later on this evening. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out. You could also use the fnl@carthage.edu email just for those generic questions as well. We'll route them out as needed.
Awesome. Looking forward to some excellent proposals.
Thank you
Thank you
guys.
so much for your time.
Thank you.